Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Serger Tip Clips. Well, if you've taken my cover stitch workshop or seen any of my tip clips with the cover or chain stitch in it, you might have heard me talk about what a fantastic stitch this is for surface embellishment on any kind of project, whether it's a garment, tablet case cover, a home deck, quilting, anything like that. Because basically, all you're doing is stitching. It's really not a hard stitch to get a beautiful surface embellishment with. I like to put 12 weight or even sometimes 8 weight thread in my chain looper to make it really pop. It really gives it a lot of texture and dimension. It's fantastic. And on this tablet case cover, I did a variation of the cover stitch, and I've been working on this for a little while, and I call it the stack cover stitch because there are multiple stitches on top of each other. And I think it really gives a lot of dimension to the fabric itself. And this is the tablet case cover, and I use Kaffe Fassett's tree fungus, I think he calls it, fabric, and thought that the way the design went with the lines on it, let me get it right in the camera, it echoed the look of the fabric lines as well. So it's a very pretty stitch to do, whether you use the triple cover stitch, a wide, narrow, or a chain stitch. I'll show you how to get some great results with using the right stabilizer on the bottom and talk about the decorative threads that I like best for it. So let's go over to the machine, take a look at the stitch itself, and then we'll talk about how to get really nice results with this. I think you'll really like it. I'm at my machine and I'm set up for a wide cover stitch. So I have my left and right chain needles in. They're threaded with serger cone thread. And I have a 12 weight Egyptian cotton in my chain looper. My settings for tensions are all on the default settings for both needles and the chain looper. I decided to use a stitch length of about 2.4. I thought that worked well. And I'm keeping my differential feed on 1. And I just want to show you what I'm using for a backing on this. This is called Fusion Fleece. It's very lightweight. In fact, I just have a piece here that isn't fused to the fabric, just to show you. Pretty darn lightweight. It doesn't add a lot of bulk to the fabric, but if you're stitching with decorative threads on a quilting weight cotton, you may find that without a stabilizer or some sort of interfacing on the back of it, that your fabric is going to pucker, and especially with decorative threads. So you need something to give the fabric a little bit of body and stability with those stitches. And I find that the Fusion Fleece is a good choice, and it doesn't add so much bulk. Like even on my tablet case covers on the center panel, that's what I used to stabilize it, and it worked fine, and it wasn't super bulky even when I put the foam interfacing in. So I'm going to start off with this wide cover stitch as the first section of the stack cover stitch. So I'll see you at the needle. Whenever you're doing decorative or chain stitching, you want to stitch with the fabric wrong side face up, and with this, the fleece is fused to it. So that's what you're looking at. Here is the right side of my fabric. Another tip that I have for when you're starting stitching like this is don't start right on the edge of your fabric. Move it in just a little bit more, um, right within your seam allowance, just to be sure that your machine doesn't jam if you're starting right at the edge. As you know, with cover and chain stitching, you always want to start with your fabric under the needle, not just under the foot. I'm also using a clear foot so that you can see what you're doing. But if I were doing a specific design for this on a real project, I would want to follow those lines, and having the clear foot on makes all the difference in the world of being able to see where I'm going. It's like trying to drive in the dark without headlights on if you have your metal foot on and you're trying to follow a line. So I have everything set up and ready to roll. The other thing I wanted to mention also, which I forgot before, was that I dropped the presser foot pressure down to 1 because I want to be able to maneuver my fabric easily. If you're going to make curves, don't try to make steep curves on the fabric, because if you jerk your fabric a little bit too hard, I guarantee you'll get some skip stitches. So you just want nice, soft, gentle curves and move your fabric smoothly and easily. My presser foot right now is up. That's why I can do this, and it's very easy. So let me put the presser foot down and we'll start stitching. And you're going to just see the 2 lines of straight stitching on this side. Here's my first line of stitching, and I always like to use opposites on the color wheel. This is kind of an orangey color. I call it American cheese orange. That's what it always reminds me of. So this is really pretty. I'm going to do a few lines with the wide cover stitching, and then we're going to build that stacking. I've got 3 rows of kind of curvy lines, just soft curves here. And one other tip I have is before you start stacking your stitching, trim those thread tails short so that they don't get caught in the next line of stitching. And sometimes those ends can get twirled around, and then trying to get them out is rather difficult, and it might affect the look of the stitch. So I'm going to get set up for the next line of stitching. For the stacking and our chain stitch, I decided that it would be fun to try 2 different greens. One is kind of a spring bright green, and the other one is sort of a pea green. And I'm not quite sure how this will look on top of the orange thread that we just used for the wide cover stitching, but we'll try it out. And that's all part of the process, because oftentimes I will try different combos of threads, and sometimes they turn out looking beautiful the first try, and other times not so much. I have to change out the threads because I don't like the color combo, or I don't like it against the color of the fabric that I'm using, whatever. But I thought it would be fun for you to see this, and I do have a tip clip on how to use a thread cradle. Putting 2 12-way threads through the threading tube simultaneously with air threading isn't going to work. It's just too bulky. I need a thread cradle. So I have just serger cone thread, and I cut a big long piece. It's probably about 36 inches long, folded it in half, and I'm taking my 2 cut ends and putting those in my threading port. I'm going to close my threading tubes, and we'll put these through. And in my tip clip on the thread cradle, I always say hold on to the other end, and you'll see in the tip clip, I didn't edit it out. I was so busy talking, I didn't hold on to the thread, and it blew across the table that I was using. So now it's through, and this end is like a loop or a lasso, and this will pull my 2 threads together. So let me get these ends in, and I don't want to put too much thread through the loop because it doubles over and then it gets very thick even being pulled through the threading tube. So maybe a couple of inches. And I have my thread ends, if I can grab them over here, right? You can't see the looper, but you can see my hand. I can't move the camera at the same time. And now it is through. Here you can see the 2 threads that are through the eye of my chain looper, which is right up here. I didn't like that first line of chain stitching with the green, so I decided to switch to a narrow cover stitch. So I am going to change my settings to stitch number 24 on my machine, which is the L890. That's the center and right chain needle. So let's see how we like this. Oh, I do like that. And I left that kind of a pinky thread in the needles because I thought that would be sort of pretty. But now I do like that look. I think it just needed a wider stitch on top of the orange. Here it is without the stacking. Here it is with. And I may do one more stitch on top of this. Let's see. But let me run over these other 3 lines first. and we'll see how those look. I'm going to stitch that last line, and then I think I might even try a chain stitch on top of this. This will be the first time I've tried 3 different stitches all stacked together, but I think it might be really cool looking, but we'll see. Okay, so here are my 3 lines of stitching, and you can see, let me just trim, well, get these out of the way. You can see on the center one, I didn't stay in the dead center. I went a little bit off, and I did the same thing over here. But you know what? It still looks really, really nice. And that's what I mean about you don't have to be super exact in every single spot. You'll still get a great finished looking stitch. So now I'm going to set my machine up for a single needle chain stitch. Whenever I change stitches or threads or anything else in cover chain stitch mode, and also I guess for overlock as well, I always run off a test stitch on scrap fabric, whatever I happen to have, but particularly with cover chain stitch mode, simply to bring up that thread tail that's sitting under the bed of the machine in the chain looper eye. So I've done that. And now we're ready, and I'm leaving my stitch length on 3.5 because I'm going over 2 layers of stitching, which are pretty thick, plus the fabric and that lightweight stabilizer. So now let's see what this looks like, and this will be a first. We'll try this out, and this may be something new that I'm going to start doing if it looks good. So let's take a look. Ooh, really nice. I really like that. Just pull that out. And it's always a good idea if you've got long threads at the beginning or end to cut them before you do your next line of stitching, because they could get caught, especially since you've got the fabric wrong side face up. So I'm just going to give these a little haircut and get rid of them. That's at the end of the fabric. So now I'm going to run over my next 2 lines of stitching, and I really like that. And there may be one more stitch that I'll do. I'll do a table shot so you can really see clearly what I've done with all of these stitches. But here we are so far with the orange is the wide cover stitch, that green is a narrow cover stitch, and the rosy color in the center is a chain stitch. And I thought, just to add a little definition along the edge, I think I'm going to outline the stitch with a navy blue thread, and we'll see how that looks. So I'm still set up for a chain stitch, and I have navy 12 weight thread in my chain looper. So I'm turning this over. I also gave this a real quick press just to get any little puckers out. So I am going to ride along this and just stitch on the outside edge. And again, if I'm not right next to it and there's a little bit of space, perfectly all right. And when you're doing something like this, you do want to just take your time. If you want to slow down the speed on your machine, if you have that option, then that is helpful too. Yeah, I kind of like that. I think that's sort of nice. So I think I'll get down the other sides and I'll show it to you at the table. Here's the table shot of the stitching that I did on camera. So you can see that I did the 3 stacked cover stitches over here and chain stitching, and then off camera I added this bright green chain stitching on either side of that stacked cover stitch. But I think it would be helpful as a review just to look at the progression of this. So I did one more stitch out, and here that is. So here is the first line of stitching with the wide cover stitch, and then I added the narrow cover stitch with the 2 12-weight green threads on top of that. And then the next line to stack on top of that, and this is the first time I tried 3 different stitches stacked on top of each other, the rose-colored chain stitching. And then I really like this as kind of an outline, and it kind of is like a finishing touch on the whole stitch and gives it it almost looks like trim to me, or braiding. So I did the bright green chain stitching on either side of that. And let's take a look at the backside, because sometimes it's a little bit hard to follow exactly where you're going on that. And this is what it looks like when I'm all finished. So as you move along, you can see this is my wide cover stitching on the inside. Then there's another line of chain stitching in here, all of those plus the chain stitching on either side of the stack cover stitch on this side. So it's really kind of cute on both sides, but I think it's really particularly beautiful on this. So I hope you enjoy it and try it, and send me some photos. I love seeing these things. Thanks for joining me today. And be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out on future tip clips. I also like to post videos of events that I'll be in person at around the country now that we're traveling again. Isn't it wonderful? So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to post them below and I'll get back to you quickly with an answer. Happy sewing and serging.